Welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon, the podcast, where we dive deep into all things health and wellness to help you find health and healing inside and out for now and forever.
Hello and welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon. I am Megan Abbott, owner and founder of the holistic health practice Trifecta Collective. And this is my co-host and head practitioner, Shannon Callery. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi.
So today we're doing a special episode for the end of the year. And, we're kind of playing around with the title and we kind of wanted to talk about New Year's resolutions, but we're also pretty anti-New Year's resolutions. So we want to talk, we labeled this a year in review. And what we're going to talk about is, we're going to touch a piece on kind of getting through the holidays. We also want to talk about why New Year's resolutions may not be the best option for most people. We personally do not set New Year's resolutions. However, we do have kind of an end of the year things that we typically do at reflection, and then also, setting intentions and goals and looking into the future, into the next year. I also have a little bit of a unique perspective on a couple of things coming from the fitness industry and coming from a management role in the fitness industry. And I do want to talk about that because I think it's really important, something that most people just don't know, especially because many people set New Year's resolutions around health and wellness, fitness, getting back into the gym, and been through many cycles of that personally from a professional standpoint and, obviously personally as well. But, I just want to give some feedback on that as well. But we want to talk about different things that we can do as part of our end of the year little ritual or just like a little routine, and then what it looks like, some of the things that we have done and maybe some suggestions of things that we talk to clients about looking into the future and into the new year.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one really big thing that comes up for me is because I did used to set New Year's resolutions for myself, as I'm sure Megan probably has dabbled in that too. Most people do. And typically what ends up happening is that we're trying to be like really strict with ourselves. We set these goals where there's not like a lot of wiggle room, and that can just create like more stress in our lives. And it's just, the whole thing seems like just very strict and structured, and it really doesn't have to be that way. Like when we get down to it, and we'll talk about this more, when we're setting goals and whatnot, we want to be focusing on how do we want to feel, not so much like how do we want our body to look. I mean, we can have goals for health, maybe it's okay to want to change that, but I think the majority of the time we're doing that in a negative way, especially when it comes to like body image, and even with like work, and just like everything feels really compressed and tense. And then we pick the absolute worst time of the year to make these goals. It's when we don't have any time to like sit down and reflect on our own lives. We're not in a calm state. This is right around the time where we have like, it's holiday season, Thanksgiving, Christmas, people are traveling, families coming over. It's a very like chaotic energy time. And that's not the best time to try and look inward, focus on like, how do you want to feel next year? Maybe stir up like some of the good stuff, some of the bad stuff. It's really just not a great time to do that.
No, and I think, one of the things that is going to be a big theme of this episode is going to be intention. And I think, so many people go into the intention of really punishing themselves, of, I'm going to go to the gym, 4 or 5 days a week. I'm going to do a Whole30. I'm going to do this, no sugar. And it's, while those things, once again, like are okay, if we're doing that, coming at that from a perspective of punishment, of I was bad during the holidays, and we're coming at it from a punishing standpoint, those things don't last. Like, and this is a huge focus within our practice. And I know we've talked about this dozens and dozens of times at this point, but, our whole focus in our practice and working with clients is not only to help people heal, which is obviously a big goal, but also it's really about lifestyle and long-term shifts and changes. And that's a big reason why we don't do crazy things. We don't do crazy elimination diets. We're not putting up people on crazy supplement protocols. We're not, you have to do X, Y, and Z. And if you don't do that, you're gonna fail. It's really about how do we support people in their healing journey, not only during the time that they're working with us, but also really for the rest of their lives. And what are habits, what are shifts, what are changes, what are connections that we can help people make that are really going to help improve their overall health and well-being long term.
Yeah. And this is why this is kind of off topic, but not at the same time. It very well ties in. This is why we see success with people is because we're taking things slowly. We're not setting these massive goals, like adding, yes, we're definitely making a lot of changes, but we're not saying like, hey, you have to do all of this stuff, make all of these changes, within this first month or whatever. Like these are really, really like long-term lifestyle changes. And that kind of applies to the goals, the New Year's resolution stuff, a different way to look at it. If we have the mindset of like, maybe I don't need to be like adding more things in, really like stacking up my to-do list. Sometimes we need to take a step back and slow down, and again, like focusing on that feeling that can really help guide you into like, what do I want my goals actually to be? Because if you're someone who maybe has like high anxiety, high stress levels, if you're thinking about adding more things in, that most likely means that your stress levels are going to raise. So this is just really a different way of looking at this time around the new year and kind of setting up for your year ahead.
Exactly. And so I'm just dive into kind of what my practice has been the last couple years. And I think there's a lot of value in this. And I don't think, this is the only way to do it, but I think there's a lot of value in sharing what I've done the last few years and have seen a lot of success and long-term changes. And, obviously I'm really excited to do this year because my life has changed so much this year. And just to be able to dive into this process is so valuable and so rewarding. And so, for me, what this really looks like is, so I usually do take a week off of work, kind of calls. I usually take a week off of calls, right around, I do celebrate Christmas. And so obviously that looks different for people as well, but I usually do take some time off. And I really like schedule in a half day to go through this process. And the first thing that I do is look back at the previous year and look at, and obviously if this is your first time, this is not probably going to be a part of it, although you might reflect back on if you did have New Year's resolutions or goals that you wanted to accomplish for the year. But I look back at what my intentions were, what goals, what shifts I was looking to make from the previous year. I also, big into spirituality, energy work, and I do card pulls and from a couple of different decks and do that thing. So I always look back at, okay, what did I pull? What did that look like? And then I spent some time just what has changed in my life this year. And there's no good or bad. It's just what has changed, what has shifted in my life. And I kind of do it, especially because, I've run a business. And so I do like a personal one. And then I also do a professional one. And what does that look like? What changes have I made? What, how's that shown up in my life? And I don't like to use the word like positive and negative, but how has that shown in my life? And how am I reflecting that in myself? How has that shifted how I feel? All of that kind of stuff. And I usually write, and I have like a specific journal where I do a lot of this writing.
Yeah.
And so it's a reflection, once again, like personal, professional, what has shifted, what has changed. And then I really think about, how do I feel now? Where do I stand right now, once again, personally, professionally, and what does that really look like? And, I haven't done this yet, But I can tell you a big goal kind of going into this year and something that came up for me towards the end of last year was, how do I fill my own cup up? And what does that look like? And I just had a conversation with someone this morning about this. And so I think there is a lot of value in, especially for women, a lot of us don't even know what fills our cup up. And that's where I stood kind of at the end of last year, beginning of this year of, I don't really know. I don't really know what fills my cup up. And so I thought about, a variety, and I had a whole list of things that I kind of wanted to try. And then my life took a whole turn, and things have changed so much, but it was, how do I fill my own cup up? What does that look like? What does that feel like? And, I was feeling really unsettled and depleted kind of at the end of last year, going into this year. And I didn't want to feel that way. And so where I decided to start with that was, okay, well, what helps me fill my cup up? And I can tell you, everything has, basically everything in my life has changed except the business. But how my cup is so full now. And so that's a huge accomplishment, and that looks way different than I expected. And for me, I kind of did this reevaluation as I was making changes at the middle of this year and reflecting now of, okay, my cup is really full, and what does that look and feel like? And, I haven't shared this publicly, and I did decide to do, and Shannon, FYI, I did decide I wanted to do a solo episode, probably just a short episode sharing some of the changes. But I'm in a different relationship now, and a big thing for me that I didn't even realize was I wasn't being loved how I wanted to be loved. And a part of that was on me of, I don't even know how I want to be loved. And what does that look like? What does that feel like? And I've done love languages and all that, all that human design, anagrams, like all that kind of stuff. And for me now, I am very much being loved the way I want to, and being supported in ways I've literally never in my life, even as a child, have never been supported. And my cup is so full, and it makes such a big difference. And so, that piece is huge for me. So that's a really big thing. And so, yeah, that, just kind of reflections. And then that's a really big one. And just once again, filling my cup up was a big one, big example, cup very full, and it's amazing. So yeah, that's a big piece. And then, kind of after I do this reflection piece, how do I feel now? 3-step process. Reflections on last year. And what kind of my goals and intentions were, where am I now? How do I feel now? And then looking into next year, what are some shifts or changes that I do want to make? And to give you an example on this one, a really solid example. So, at the end of last year, once again, I was feeling very burnt out, overwhelmed, drained. And part of that was I was overextending myself on the business. And I did this whole big whiteboard of just, everyone on the team, what everyone on the team did, what I did. And then before I made any changes, I also met with the team. And, Shannon, we obviously did this. We're going to do this again this year where are you guys now? How do you want to grow? How do you want to shift? What does that look like? What are roles and responsibilities that you would like to take over? Personal goals, professional goals, monetary goals, all that kind of stuff. And then I was able to make a lot of shifts, just looking at this whiteboard of all the roles and responsibilities of everyone, and it's not perfect I can't just make things happen and be like, okay, everyone gets to do what they want to do. But, it is a really solid guiding point of, where can we start making some shifts and changes? And I have very much made a lot of those shifts and changes. I've largely stepped out of a lot of the day-to-day stuff from a business perspective, which once again, that is very much filling out my cup. I don't feel as drained because I'm not on, 6 to 8 hours of calls 5 days a week anymore. And it's more like 2 or 3 days, which makes a huge difference. So that's a really big thing. And and so, I'll probably do a lot of this, a similar practice this year of, okay, well, where are we now from a business? how do I feel now in the business, and what are some, based on where everyone else wants to be, where I want to be, like, what does that really look like, and where can we continue to make shifts and changes, that are in the highest good and alignment for all of us.
Yeah. And I love that, I do the same thing too, where I it's not just like setting goals or, whatever you want to call it for just myself. Like of course I do focus on myself. Then I do have like my work life one. And then, my fiance, Rob, and we will also do one together. Like, where are we, excuse me, where are we trying to go? Like, what do we want to accomplish? And this looks different for everyone, but like for me, it's really important that I do all three of those. And then this is kind of random, but for me, I don't do this in December at all. I've tried it a couple times. Like I've done it in November one time. I've tried it in December. And what really feels good to me is doing this in January. My birthday is in January, so it kind of feels like that's my time. Like that's my new year starting, and it just so happens that it's close to everything else. So that really and again, you don't have to do this in December. Like you can put it off a month or two. Last year, I think I really sat down and did it right in the beginning of February, just because my life was a little bit chaotic. And I know that if I'm not if my nervous system is not regulated, it's going to be more difficult for me to tune into what I actually want, for me to sit down and reflect on the year. I just won't be able to connect with myself if my body is not feeling relaxed. And I will normally do some type of ritual, like you said, meditation to start it off. I like to have my oracle decks, candles lit. I have to create the vibe for me to tune in and feel what I actually want. And sometimes too, it's difficult, or can be difficult, when you look back and see, hey, maybe I didn't accomplish or get to exactly where I wanted to be, some things that I had wrote on my list for the previous year. But I also think, working on acceptance during that time and realizing where you're at in your journey, your healing journey, whatever you want to call it, and noticing and accepting that things change. There's a handful of things that I wrote down last year. For example, I live away from all of my family and friends right now. And a really big thing for me was just connection throughout this past year. And it looked, I did not complete that goal or whatever it didn't look the way that I thought it would. And a big part of that was working on acceptance for me, and just realizing I need to get more comfortable in different areas of my life, focus on healing in other ways. Things can look different than what we originally planned and expected. And I do think it's really important to work on acceptance around that.
Yeah, I think you brought up two amazing points that I want to expand on just a little bit more. The first one is doing this in a relationship. And, for me, I was not in the right relationship to do that until now. My current partner and I will absolutely do that, especially because we are traveling together. If you haven't guessed by my change in background, I am in an RV, and the plan is to travel over the next year at the very least, and be able to explore. And so a lot of our practice together will be, where do we want to go? Especially because we're not always huge planners. We're both pretty intuitive people, and so we kind of like to fly by the seat of our pants a little bit. However, we also know going into the summer that we do have to plan, just because places, campgrounds, RV parks are going to be busier. And so we do have to just do a little bit more planning. And so, that's a huge, huge kind of piece to it. The other piece is, and, I went to this place yesterday and met this really interesting gentleman while we were at this amazing little spa place. And, one of the questions that he's been married for, I think 10 years, very into the spiritual space. And, the question that him and his wife, have recently had this really big conversation about was, what is the purpose of your relationship? And, it was really interesting that we actually had that conversation before we got together and continue to have that conversation. And I think going into next year, that question will probably come up again for us of looking into the next year. What is really the goal? What is really the purpose of our relationship? And what do we want out of that? Where are we now in our relationship? And what shifts and changes may we want to make? And we do have this conversation quite often, but we'll probably have a more formal kind of conversation around this as well. So I think that's a great piece to add, is the relationship piece if you're in that kind of relationship. And once again, I haven't been until now. And so I think that plays a really big role. The other piece that you brought up is the compassion for not meeting goals. And I don't even like sometimes the word goals. I know.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Me either.
I really like the word intention so much better. And you're reflecting on what were your intentions going into, this current year, and, maybe what you haven't completely fulfilled, maybe where things have shifted or changed, because life happens. And so, and it's not about being hard on yourself. And that's why if we think about goal, you can fail a goal, you can succeed in a goal. But with an intention, you don't really win or succeed at an intention.
It's true. Yeah.
That's just not really how it works. And so I really like this intention piece of this, of even if you got sidetracked, you didn't, that ended up not becoming a priority, or, things changed or shifted. It's not about success or failure. It's really about growth. Where have you grown, and where do you want to grow going into the new year? And once again, if we think about growth, there's so many different ways to grow. And, growth is about, expansion and healing and, becoming better versions of ourselves and being more connected to ourselves, these types of things, versus I want to lose 20 pounds. I'm going to go to the gym 5 days a week, and you're going to fail. Most likely you're going to fail at that, which, doesn't feel good for anyone. And we're also, if you're going into that with the intention, it's probably not great. You're probably going in, once again, as a punishment of some sort, versus going in with, I love myself. I know I feel really good when I move more. And so I'm going to set the intention that I want to move 2 or 3 days a week in a very intentional way. That's a totally different kind of mind shift versus I'm going to go to the gym 5 days a week. I've been bad. I ate too much sugar in December. I overate. And so I need to go so that I look a certain way.
Yeah.
It's also not going to stick.
Yeah, because when we set those intentions based from a punishment mentality, it's almost like our mind and our body knows, and you're not going to stick with it or keep up with it. When we actually take the time to dig a little bit deeper, try and be nice to ourselves, which for most people, that is something that I think we're becoming more and more aware of. We're learning that hey, this harsh go punishment mentality lifestyle is not really serving a whole lot of people anymore. And we're slowly shifting out of that, trying to get to know ourselves, to grow internally, to be nice to ourselves. And that's a big part of setting these intentions. And just like Megan was saying, when we're setting the intentions, anything that you feel is attainable, that you can take actionable steps to do, and that can look so different across the board. I mean, one of my big things this year was connection in multiple areas, with nature, with myself, continuing to grow, and it played out in completely different ways than I thought it was going to. So again, things can show up differently. And I think that's a big part of why it's important to reflect back on your previous year, because when you actually sit down and think about it, start to write it out, you might notice oh, hey, that showed up for me, but in a different way than I was expecting it to.
Exactly. And I think, if we think about, and we're really big on this in habits, how do we start to shift and change habits? And I mean, if you read any, Atomic Habits is like the book that comes to mind. There's so many books on habits, and I don't completely agree with all the stuff in the Atomic Habits piece. But one of the best ways that we've really found to add in habits, shift habits, and keep them in long term is connecting that to an emotion. How do you feel when you do that? I know we've talked about this once again, like dozens of times, but adding in protein, just like adding in that protein with every single meal, starting your meal with that source of protein, you're going to notice energy increases, probably cognition increases, blood sugar regulates, like mood's going to be better. And then, you realize that. And if you reflect on, okay, well, how does this make me feel? And how do I feel when I don't have that protein? Feel a little foggy, a little lethargic, maybe a little bit of a crash, those 3 a.m. or 3 p.m. like crashes. You're like, gosh, all I want to do is take a nap. All of that stuff starts to come back. And when you recognize, okay, well, I feel really good when I eat this way, or when I do a 5-minute meditation every single day, like I feel more relaxed going into the day. I feel more focused. I feel calmer. I'm not reacting to situations, with these big reactions. I'm just a little bit calmer, going throughout the day. That's what makes habits stick. And, if we reflect back on, once again, on how we felt, on how, doing the things that maybe are not the most supportive of our overall well-being, how do we start to do that? The other piece of this is if you have several pieces on your list of like, I really want to focus on my mental and emotional health. Okay, well, what does that look like? Don't add in 10 things at once. Don't start therapy and go to a breathwork class and do yoga and, like all of these things. Do one thing for a whole month. And that's the only shift you are actively trying to make, is that one piece. And also, don't make it crazy. If you never go for walks and you're like, I'm going to go for a walk every single day, you're probably going to fail. But if you're like, I'm going to go for a 10-minute walk 3 or 4 times a week, what an amazing starting point. That's very tangible, very realistic. It's a step in the right direction. And you're going to feel good and you're going to get some benefits from that. And after you get really comfortable with that and you have a lot of success, all right, well, add in an extra day, add in an extra 10 minutes and baby step it that way. And once again, this is largely what we do in our practice of, we have to see where people are right now. And this gets really confusing for some people on our consults of what exactly are we going to do? Well, it really depends on where you are right now. And the recommendations are going to be largely based on where you are right now. Once again, if you have no movement practice or no mindfulness practice, we're not going to say, you need to spend an hour doing breath work or doing a walk or, going to the gym, whatever it is, because that's not realistic. That's not going to be feasible for you. But we can add in a 2-minute meditation every single day. That's going to be a lot more realistic and practical and a really good stepping stone into whatever the ultimate goal is. The ultimate goal is really just being more regulated or getting some movement and helping our bodies feel good. And that also can look really different depending on the person.
Yeah.
But really, if you can baby step it, the likelihood of the success and that you're going to be able to make that connection of, hey, when I do this, I feel good, I feel better. This is what shifts and changes in my, physical, mental, emotional health. That's going to help you keep up these habits, these shifts, make these intentions a lot more successful, once again, especially long term.
Yeah. And then just in addition to that, you can change your intentions throughout the year, your goals, your intentions, whatever you want to call them. They're not set in stone. I feel like that's a really big thing. I mean, and I'm guilty of that too. It's changed throughout the years, but I feel like when we get this whole thing set up, we try it for like a month or two, and sometimes we get frustrated. We're like, damn, like this isn't working out the way that I thought it would, or I don't have time for this. This is making my life more difficult. You can shift them. You're in control of them. You're in control of, these intentions that you set and how they play out in your life. So yeah, I feel like that's just another big thing that most people feel like they can't make any shifts or adjustments. And it's part of that. I feel like that's part of that like punishment energy too, or just really like strict rigidness, which again, this whole New Year's resolution thing, that's kind of, to us, what it has felt like and why we chose to do it a different way or look at it from a different way.
Exactly. And once again, I have not done this, but one of my intentions going into next year is to do this on a quarterly basis and block out a whole day on my calendar for this. Once again, like personally, professionally, in a relationship, like what does this look like? Because I see a lot of value in that. And one of the big things that I've really started working on, especially in the business side, is setting up systems and, having this day set aside of like, all right, well, what systems are in place? What are not? What have we put in place that is it doing well? Is it not doing well? Do we need to make some shifts or changes? And so I do see a lot of value in doing this more often than once a year, but I think once a year is a really good starting point.
Yeah, that's, honestly, I always talk about I do like check-ins with myself, but not in a sense that way. And I feel like that's a really good idea because it's also a way to help keep yourself on track too and see what's changing throughout that time frame. So I love that idea. Maybe I'll put that on my intentions for this year.
So glad we've exchanged ideas already. So this is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So before we kind of keep going on this, I just want to talk about one piece, and that goes into the fitness piece. And this isn't to discourage people from going to a gym or setting fitness goals, because that is not my intention going into this. And I also think, once again, like just coming from my background in the management side in the fitness industry, I saw this every single year for like 5 years. And it's tough. And Shannon and I were talking about this, and I think there was some light shed on this when her and I were talking. And so I thought we would bring this up on that episode here too. But, there's an increase, a significant increase in people who sign up for gym memberships going into the first of the year. And there are specials everywhere. The marketing for gyms in like Q1 is crazy and super intense. And the goal is to get people to sign up. And you'll see an influx of people usually starting like the second or third week of January, kind of through middle of February, and then it completely dies off. And you might see one or two of those people continue to show up at the gym and actually like have success. And I'm talking success meaning they're showing up. And I think it's really important to understand that there's a reason for this. And this is on purpose from a business perspective, where gyms, by and large, at least the ones that I have worked in, the whole goal is to make the most of your money in Q1. And the goal for the rest of the year is to break even. And so the profits are happening and they are spending boatloads of money. They're increasing hours for the staff, for management, for sales staff, for personal training staff. I mean, there's a huge push, and the whole month of December is honestly like about training and preparation going into January, because the goal is to be pretty hardcore on the sales side of things. Fine. And I've also seen a lot of bullying happen as a result of this, and people being guilted, pushed into buying gym memberships, of feeling bad, of being pushed in personal training or group X classes, of, all this kind of stuff. And that's the whole goal, is to get you to sign up for these things. And also knowing that most people aren't going to show up. Out of all of the memberships, about 80% of people, at least this was the statistic back when I was working in corporate gyms, of 80% of your members don't show up on a regular basis. And that was kind of the goal, because otherwise the gym would be super overcrowded all of the time. And so you had your small group of core members who would show up on a very regular basis. And then you have people who every once in a while, they would just trickle in. And then by and large, most people are just paying for a membership and not showing up and using the facilities. And once again, that was the intention set up. So I just think it's important to understand that by and large, now I'm not saying 100%, but at least from my experience working in several corporate gyms. Like that was the goal. And once again, I think going to the gym, I think participating in health and wellness activities, like amazing, great, as long as it's coming from the right intention, which punishment is not the right intention. If you want to feel better, I also don't think there's anything wrong with looking a different way or, getting stronger. I think that's fine. But once again, are you punishing yourself? Are you thinking that if you look a certain way, you'll find happiness? Because that is 100% not the case. Just by the way, when I was back in Richmond during my journey, we had a lot of conversations about body image. And, I didn't realize how much has shifted with my own body image until I was talking with these women. And just like, I look very different. My body shape has changed a lot. I'm not going to the gym as much. And, there's a lot of reasons for that. And I will be going back to the gym. And I do like the gym and I like to feel strong. And other things have just become a priority. And that doesn't mean I'm not moving or, doing things to support my body. And, I'm not the skinniest I've ever been. And I also feel the best that I've ever felt and feel so good in my body and love my body and support my body. And, even my nutrition, isn't the best it's ever been. And I feel great. And that really goes back to the nervous system regulation and the trauma healing piece of, I hated myself. I hated my body for so long. And, throughout my healing journey, it's always been a big thing. And this year has really shifted for me in that and realizing how much I love my body. I feel confident and I feel good. I feel really, really good. And that's kind of the goal. And I think that should be the goal for, especially as women, for most of us, of how do we just feel really good in our bodies and love our bodies no matter what state they are in. And even if you want to change your body, that doesn't mean you don't love your body. Once again, it goes back to intention. What is the intention of shifts, of changes? And what does that really look like? And are we doing it from a place of love and compassion and support? Or are we doing it from, I hate my body, so I'm going to do this to look a different way, thinking that I'm going to feel a different way if I look a different way, which will not happen.
Yeah. And it's easier. Easier said than done, because there's always, if you are a person who, and I've been through this too, that was a really, really big issue for me. So big, to the point where I haven't even fully gone back in the gym yet. There's still some healing that needs to be done around that. But if that is you and you are thinking that way, a big part of that comes from well, how am I being perceived by other people? People pleasing, caring too much about what other people think. There's always going to be we call it a core wound at the center of that. For mine, it was, am I good enough? And, that can play out in so many different ways, work, just body image, so many different ways. And that's if you are that person, or you feel like you're making these intentions or goals around what am I going to look like to other people? How are people going to perceive me? Ask yourself that. Literally ask yourself that question after you write down all of your intentions and your goals. Go back through, and I would encourage you to just ask yourself, is this for me, or is this because I want to be perceived a certain way? And I guarantee there's going to be, and even I still do that sometimes. If you take the time to go back and look at that, I guarantee that there's going to be some shifts in what you're writing down in your intentions for the year ahead.
Yeah, I'll also throw this out there too, that the people who are most consistent in the gym, who are showing up, anywhere between 2 to 5 times a week, they do that because it feels good. And they're doing that because they understand more than just the physical aspect. While it physically feels good, there's also a huge mental and emotional piece of this. They are also some of the least judgmental people I have ever met in my entire life. If you think about the bodybuilders, the power lifters in particular, gosh, dude, they just want to help you and support you. And they'll spot you. They will, help you with form, ask them a question. I mean, some of the nicest people I've ever met. And this is across the board in gyms, but and I know they often look intimidating because many of these people look really fit or are super strong or both.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't care. They don't care what you're doing. They don't care what you look like. They are happy you are at the gym unless you are doing something weird in equipment, hogging a piece of equipment, not following proper gym etiquette, then they'll get a little bit annoyed. But by and large, they are in there because it feels good for them and they've recognized this and they're super consistent with it. And they're just happy that, other people are showing up and it feels good for them. And they're, people are just trying to do their thing and they are more than happy to help. And they do not care what you look like. They do not, they're not judging you. They are not staring at you. None of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true. Because I think that's a big reason, or like just the anxiety piece alone. Like if you are someone who's trying to create a better movement routine for yourself, it can be really tough to want to enter that space if you've been out of it or never in it before, because like you said, people look intimidating. The whole setup can feel intimidating sometimes if you're not used to it. Of course, like if you're brand new, typically we feel uncomfortable when we do new things and it just takes time and habit to get used to it. But yeah, and just finding a space that you feel good at too. And it doesn't even have to be, again, it doesn't have to be jumping into the gym right away. It can be starting with like walking a couple times a week, maybe like doing some type of like community yoga class, whatever you feel is the best for you. There's so many different options. And I will say this kind of applies to what you had mentioned about like the gym industry and, making money within like the first quarter. It probably isn't so much about making money, but just like we see lots of commercials around this time of year, probably like December, January timeframe, about like eating healthy and buying healthy foods. Like the ads start to change instead of like just, talking about specific products or whatever. They do start to talk about like health and whatnot. And I'm sure if you've ever been to the grocery store right after New Year's Day, you've seen it be like completely wiped out, like all the fresh food and veggies like wiped out at a certain point. So where I'm going with this is I think it's important to just tune in to yourself and block out some of that noise, because we're so easily influenced, especially social media too. Like I can't even imagine, what that's like around the holiday time. People, because I don't follow any of the like the dieting accounts or like the workout accounts. That's just not what I'm on. But I can only imagine that people are like amping that up around like New Year's too and whatnot. So just really taking the time to sit down, create that space for yourself, look inward, focus on how you want to feel, and maybe try something different. Try setting intentions instead of goals for this year and just see where it takes you.
Yeah, and I'll also say, this marketing stuff works. And, last year, and I haven't decided if I'm going to do this again, but we did a January detox last year, like a special, I think it was 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. I honestly don't even remember.
I vaguely remember.
Yeah, but we advertised it as a detox, like a January detox. And it worked. Like the marketing works for that. And if you listen to any time I talked about what this program was going to look like or what this detox was going to look like, it was everything we talk about of like, how do you start to shift, your nutrition? How do we add in a mindfulness practice? How do we drink more water? It was very subtle. And it was like, there was an optional liver detox pathway, like supplement support protocol, but it was optional. It was not mandatory. And I think that's important to understand too, that, as a business, yeah, we have to do this sometimes. And even if you look at our social media, high cortisol stuff does really, really well on social media. And yeah, I talk about it. We post about it. We do, the headlines, 7 signs of high cortisol. Like, are these making you say, whatever it is. And if you read anything in the description about that talks about how to heal, that's where our true messaging comes out, because that attention grab is important. And if we talked about, okay, how do we regulate cortisol? Add in a 5-minute meditation protocol. Like, those posts don't do well. Just like full disclosure, we still do them and they don't do well by and large across the board, because it's not fancy, it's not fun. But that's the real reason. And that's why you'll see in a lot of our messaging, we talk about cortisol dysregulation, or how we start to regulate cortisol. Because even the term high cortisol, like, not accurate for 90% of the people who think they have high cortisol. They might have high cortisol at night. They might have high cortisol at some point during the day, but it's really about their cortisol curve. And so I think that's important to understand of, look at the marketing, look at the messaging, because some of the marketing, once again, like, just as a business owner, we've got to get people's attention. And what grabs people's attention versus what is the true messaging, and what does that actually sound like and look like, and what are they promoting? And I am still very involved in, like, the fitness, weight loss kind of industry. I'm in a lot of groups that talk about that. We do get referrals from it, which is largely why I still participate in those, although I float in and out because sometimes I get a little overwhelmed with annoyance of some of the messaging that is occurring, or how people are talking about this, or people who aren't trained very well talking about certain things. And so, but it dig deeper into the messaging of a lot of the things. And once again, as Shannon mentioned, check in with yourself. How does this feel? Like, looking at all of the, commercials or, marketing or ads or whatever it is, like, how does that resonate with you? Like, what is the true message going on? And once again, like, what is the intention? Are they promoting, like, lose 20 pounds in a month? Like, oh, you're probably going to have to do some crazy stuff. Versus, are they focused on how do we shift habits? How do we shift changes? What does that look like? Are we doing restrictive dieting? Are we, is it a Whole30 group? Is it a restart? I know the restart thing is really big in our world, and not a fan. Just like, is it a sugar detox? Like, are you just like eliminating sugar for 5 to 30 days? And then it's like, all right, run free. In which case you're going to fail. The sugar is going to come right back in 100% right off the bat. Anytime anyone in our practice does like a Whole30 or anything along those lines, like, we always have the conversation of, all right, we're going to slowly reintroduce things. We're not going 100%. How do you feel? How do you eat? How have you felt? And people just go crazy. And that's why we don't do it. By and large, why we don't do this stuff, because it does not work. And once again, if you're focusing on restriction, on hate, on self-hate, on punishment, things aren't going to change long term. And really, like, coming at this and from a marketing perspective, like, what is the intention of whatever anyone is marketing? What's the intention of that is important.
Yeah. And I don't feel like, if you go through and read, like, if you're listening to any of these podcasts, you're going to understand that there is no quick fix. We don't believe in any quick fixes for anything. So it really is important to, like, dig into that. And yeah, especially like with the health stuff, if you see, this goes for like food and things like parasites or detoxing in general. Like, there is 100% a difference in doing something like a detox that is maybe slowly changing your lifestyle habits, doing a detox where they're telling you, here, take all of these supplements for 7 days and your problems are going to be fixed. A little bit of a red flag. Like, those are two different things. So again, like, looking at the messaging and, like, if you're looking at ours, I'm sure you're aware that things take time. Like, we literally tell people, sometimes 6 to 12 months, like, depending on what it is. So this is, like, not a quick thing. It's just important to, again, figure out your intentions and what you want, and that's going to help guide you to a better place.
Exactly. So yeah, and even, I know for us, we are going to do something around gut health. And I'm not going to announce, like, officially what it is, but it's going to be around gut health and not doing restrictive eating and improving your gut health. And, for us, like, there's going to be a beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And the goal is to go through the checklist of start at the beginning phase. Does this help your symptoms improve? Like, how do you feel? Like, does this make a difference? Then intermediate. Then if not, if you're still having symptoms, bump up. And once again, like, the foundational piece of this is so important and so valuable, because if you're not changing the foundations, which is, once again, habits, we're not seeing long-term change.
Yeah. Slow and steady wins the race.
Absolutely.
I feel like that applies to so many things in life.
Yeah.
I did have some journal prompts here. Do you want to put them in the show notes so people can actually see them?
Yeah, we can put them in the show notes. Let's also go through them.
Yeah, definitely. So these are some of the ones that I use throughout the year too. Certainly not all of them, but a handful of my favorite ones. So the first one on the list is, what were your biggest accomplishments of the past year? So again, looking back at the year, just reflecting on what are your biggest accomplishments.
I also, before we move on, I think with this piece, it's really important to acknowledge your successes, no matter how big or small. They make a really big difference in our lives. And once again, this kind of goes back to, like, what fills our cup up? How do we fill our cup up more so then we have more to give, and we're giving from an overflow versus coming from a place of depletion? And so, celebrate your wins, no matter how small they are, because a win's a win. And that's great. And it deserves to be celebrated.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And when I say accomplishments, I'm glad you pointed that out, because I think for most people, they would think like, oh, I made more money, I got a promotion, like that direction, where this can mean, hey, I started to get outside more. Maybe you went to therapy, maybe you got more connected in a spiritual sense, like whatever it may be, those are all accomplishments. So yeah, really, really great point there. The next one on the list is, what were your biggest challenges and most important lessons of the year? I really, really love this one, because when we dive into what was most challenging to us, we're able to see, like, where did I struggle a little bit? Where did I grow out of that? What was the lesson that I took away from that? This is probably one of my favorite journal prompts.
Yeah. I also, this has been coming up a lot for me recently, and it's very relevant to this journal prompt. I do some business mentorship with practitioners in the holistic health space, and we are doing, this will be done by the time this episode comes out, but we're doing a Black Friday special for this. And I'm probably going to open up maybe a couple spots in December going into the new year for business mentorship clients. And, I've done several rounds of this, and I, really thinking back for me, what does success look like? And I think it's pretty fair to say I've built a successful practice in the holistic health space, helping clients, making money, profiting, growth, social media following, whatever it may be. And what is the difference between me and a lot of the clients I have worked with? And there's a few things that have come up for me that I think are very relevant. The first one is, I started in sales as like my original career out of college, and the whole thing I was taught in sales is, and I did outside sales, so it was like hardcore sales, is the goal is to talk to 50 people a day to get 2 yeses, and that means you are getting 48 no's every single day. And the mentality shift for most of us going into this was learning how to celebrate the no's, learning how to celebrate the quote unquote failures, because what did you learn from that? And you're also realizing that you're one step closer to a yes. And that if you just talk to enough people, you're going to get 1 to 2 yeses every single time. And I'll tell you, I was not the best when I first started, but I did have a crazy work ethic. And I would see as many people as I needed to get those yeses every single day. And then I ran my first business at 22. it was fine. And then also I'm burned with, I mean, there's a lot of things that are going on with that. This is not my first rodeo in the business world. I've run businesses for other people. I've had a lot of success in that. And couple of things for me, like one, there's no other option. This is it. And kind of like the same thing goes for my healing journey. Like healing is non-negotiable. And what do I need to do to make that happen? And what does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I don't have a backup plan. Like it is this business or nothing. And so it is this business. And that's a huge mentality shift. And I also know that, I've tried and we've launched so many things over the years. We've tried so many new strategies. Most of them have not worked. And there's been a handful of them that have worked. And I don't care. Sometimes the failures hurt a little bit. I don't let it get to me, hardcore.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really like, okay, but what did I learn from that? Why did that not work? Where was the disconnect? Was it me? Was it the offer? Was it, how we were talking about it? Like, what was going on? And how do we shift that moving into the next whatever thing that we're doing to see if that works? And that also may not work either. And that's okay. But once again, like, what did I learn? And we're getting one step closer to, okay, well, what does work? What is working? And we have found very solidified things that do work here within our practice. And as we launch new things, I'm sure we'll have continued failure on certain things, which is okay. And that's just a part of life. And, I think if we take these failures or, failures, like real general term here, of things that we did not succeed at or accomplish or things that didn't turn out exactly the way we wanted it to. Well, what did we learn from that and how can we grow and what does that look like moving forward?
Yeah. Another saying that I really like is you can only fail if you don't try.
Yeah.
So again, like, this is just one of those things, like with this question specifically, like, what was challenging? What did you actually try? And there really isn't, if you tried, like, there really isn't such a thing as failure. Maybe it didn't turn out the way that you wanted it to, but that just means that there's probably something else out there for you or some other way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally agree. And everything's a stepping stone.
Mm-hmm.
And, growth, you got to try things to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not all going to work. And that's totally, totally okay. And a huge part of life. And I think the more we embrace that, the better off we're going to be. And I do think that almost like freeze that inaction limits so many of us from pursuing things that we think we might really enjoy or things that might change our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I totally agree with inaction is one of the worst things that you can do. Like, why would you not try? It's okay if it doesn't work out exactly, or if you quote unquote fail. That's okay. What did you learn? What did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about whatever it was, and how can you shift and move that into what the next step is?
Yeah. And that flows perfectly into the next journal prompt, which was, what did you do this past year that you'd never done before? What did you try? What was new to you? Again, just like in this, it applies to so many different things. Like, I mean, literally anything you could think of in life, maybe going out to dinner, making, with a new friend, like whatever. It doesn't have to be solely based around like job and money and in health. Like this is so broad. And just this question alone, I feel like really boosts your confidence and lets you know, like, okay, hey, I did have the confidence to try these new things this year. And that's huge. Like, as long as we're not staying stagnant and we're in like a slow growth process, then you're probably on the right track.
Exactly. Yeah. And once again, this goes back to like, I think fear and I'm going to talk about this on my solo episode when I talk about my life changes here, but like fear holds us back from so much. And I think it's really important, once again, like this is huge in my life, especially in business, of like, I recognize when I start something new, I'm probably going to be terrible at it. Like if I look back at my, original social media posts and, my, how comfortable I felt talking on camera, I mean, not good. Not good at all. A little cringeworthy. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I looked so awkward, or like, just things didn't go super well.
Yeah.
And then I kept doing it and I got better. And now, the comfort level comes and learning and being able to shift from that. But if you don't do anything, how are you ever going to learn?
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the biggest things for me personally that I've worked on within these last, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. Mainly a lot of it was this year, but it is crazy how much fear can affect our lives and hold us back from so many things. And it's a tough one to work on too, because it can stem from so many places. But yeah, ultimately, if you're trying new things, challenging yourself to grow in different ways, you can come out of it for sure. But it's definitely something that needs to be a habit and that needs to be kept on working on. Okay, what do we got next? What are you proud of yourself for doing this year? That's a really good basic question. Again, we got to point out our own accomplishments and see where we did well in what areas. Again, try and apply this to multiple areas of your life, not just a couple things. And then what were you able to let go of or grow from? I feel like this is a really, really huge one. And this kind of prompts people to look more inward, because it's not, what's the word? Not very that's not a surface level question. You kind of have to dig inward to get the answer to this one. So I love that question also. And then the last one is going to be, is there anything you regret or need to forgive? Forgive yourself for something, maybe forgive someone else for something. Again, this can go a lot of different ways.
This is a really great one too, because, and we talk a lot about this in the trauma healing space, the nervous system regulation space of, if people do bad things to people and you feel it. And, especially when we talk about childhood trauma, for me, my mother, suffering from abuse and experiencing that and certain things that she said to me throughout my, many years as a child, unforgivable, inexcusable. And if I'm holding on to that in myself, I'm only making myself sick. And when we talk about, forgiveness, it's really about sometimes it is forgiving other people outwardly, but a lot of times it's about forgiving within ourselves and letting it go so that it's not making us sick. And that doesn't mean you're excusing someone else's actions necessarily. It's really about so you don't have to hold on to that and it doesn't have to make you sick and dysregulated and it's within yourself. And so I think that's an important piece and maybe a reflection piece of what anger, resentment, sadness, frustrations am I holding on to from another person? Maybe someone did something to you, multiple people did something to you. And does this require forgiveness of them? Or does this require forgiveness within ourselves and letting those emotions, processing those emotions for ourselves and allowing it to be released so that it no longer is stored within us and doesn't have the capacity to make us sick or continue making us sick?
Yeah. And that's a big one because, again, it can take some time to do this. If it is something that was with another person in your life and not solely yourself, sometimes it can be really hard to take that step and even look at it from a bird's eye view and just be like, hey, this is actually affecting me internally, maybe making me sick more than I thought it ever was. And it's not so much about letting this other person off the hook. This is about me wanting to step out of it and move on with my life. And again, that can look like many different ways if it's with you and another person. Not necessarily it needs to be shoved under the rug. Maybe that involves having a conversation with that person, setting some boundaries. That can look different in many ways too. But again, like, yeah, is there anything you regret or need to forgive? I that's another really great journal prompt.
Yeah. Big fan of that one.
Yeah, I love all these. So we'll put them in the show notes so you can see them. And then, if you're a person who wants more, quick Google search, you're probably going to come up with some pretty good ones too.
Yeah, that's a great idea. But these are a really good starting point. And I, kind of hit a lot of main areas of self-reflection and also opportunities to grow, develop, to shift, to change, kind of going into the next year, going to the next quarter, next couple of months. Like, what does that really look like? So, yeah, and I'll, just to throw my mom piece back in there and kind of close this full circle here.
Yeah.
It took me a lot of years, and it was after she had already passed to do a lot of this forgiveness work and let it go. And I'll tell you, like, gosh, like not having to hold on to that, and I bring it up. Yeah, some things that she did were inexcusable, and yeah, they're just inexcusable. And I have so much love and compassion for her and her life and what she suffered through. And I'm not going to let that make me sick. Like, that's only further exacerbating and promoting the generational trauma and the same patterns. And letting that go, one, has helped me heal, but also allows me to just be a better person and to lead more with love, lead more with compassion and forgiveness and, just like better intentions moving forward and not, holding on to that anger, to that resentment, to, all sadness, all the emotions that kind of come with those trauma pieces. So yeah, really, really important, really valuable. So
yeah,
I think that's anything else for you for this episode.
No, nothing else. I feel like we gave people a really good basis for trying this at like a different pace than what we normally do. So yeah, I think this was really good.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we hope you enjoyed, and we hope you got some pieces of this and maybe some reflections and intentions going into the new year versus resolutions. And so thank you for listening. As always, like, follow, subscribe, any 5-star reviews. If that resonates, it means the world to us. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you for listening, and be sure to tune in next week.
All right. Bye, everyone.